Okay, welcome to this episode of Talking Inspiration. Okay, in this episode, I'll be talking to Jamie Hardesty, who's Director of Communications and Ecosystem Development at Sunderland Software City. He's also editor of the Newcastle Tech Digest, and he's also hosted events such as Tech Next, which help highlight what's going on in the Northeast tech scene. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So, born and bred in Newcastle, stayed here for university. After I left uni, I got into the startup world. So worked for an ed tech scale up. But I've always been passionate about being a writer, being a content creator. So studied journalism. Reported on the sort of the Northeast business news scene, the tech landscape, and I got really passionate about startups, accelerator activity, and entrepreneurship and innovation in this part of the world. So yes, I'm in comms in my day job, but equally I write a lot, as you say, about all things tech happening across the north, but especially in the Northeast. So. Yeah, it's probably me in a nutshell, I think.
Yeah, because there's so much going on in the Northeast. I think from the Newcastle Tech Digest, I've found out so much that's going on. I tend to know a few things, but I learn a lot more from that because there's so much going on, and it's nice to sort of have that weekly roundup of what's going on and, what to expect. And it's great to follow companies that you've read in a previous issue do well and succeed in future ones as well, which has really been great to see.
Yep. No, I agree with that. So I'll always be the first person to, champion what we have, which is great in the ecosystem and the sort of the stuff we should be proud of. But equally, I'd be lying if I said we didn't have our challenges as well. And I think it got to the point where I was the same as you. I was looking at things and thinking, wow, there's some great stuff going on. But it could feel like, things were a bit disparate and maybe not connected, or things were missed. And as a journalist, I would always feel like I was kind of scratching the surface of what was going on. And, I'd be missing stories, or there'd be stories which were going untold, or, voices which were unheard. And I really wanted something, where we could collate all of the good stuff happening and equally have a forum for discussion and respectful debate. And it's, I think we're on approaching 270 issues, 4 to 5 years now. So it's got a real recurring retained audience where people do care and they are curious. And I think as long as we have that kind of that inquisitive and kind of thirst for kind of what's happening in the scene, I'll keep it going. So I'm glad it's serving a small purpose at least.
It is, and it helps encourage other people to share. I know it's helped me. I've been mentioned a couple of times in it myself, and it's just kind of nice to sort of have those names and go, I know that person, and follow that journey. But then to also see, like in the small ways, I've been sort of highlighting what's been going on and sort of see that mentioned as well. It's like it just reaches more people. It gets those voices out there, like you say, those unheard voices get heard that way. Yeah,
well, exactly. People like yourself who do a great job in the ecosystem. I think it's worth amplifying that and making sure people know about it so they can be connected, be informed, be inspired, and hopefully, it serves that purpose, I hope.
Brilliant. Yeah. Excellent.
Cool.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about an object that inspires you. So you'll have brought something along today that you're going to talk about in a minute. You'll also brought along a photograph, which will be of something or someone that inspires you. There'll also be a dinner or a drinks event where maybe some inspiration occurred. Also, how you found inspiration yourself, how you may have inspired someone else, and also how other people can find their own inspiration as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So let's start with the object of inspiration. So what have you brought along today that inspires you?
Cool. Okay. So today I've brought along a journal. So for as long as I can remember, I've always been passionate about writing. I've always been curious. I've always wanted to write. And I've spent, much of my career and much of my sort of personal time trying to hone that skill and improve. And it's become something that I think has been, or something which is, ingrained in my identity. And I'm very much, still learning and still on that path to improving and hopefully putting things out there in the world which are inspiring for other people or which are, at least informative. So as I say, I write a lot about the tech sector. You know, I interview a lot of entrepreneurs. I've been very, I guess, externally facing with my words. But as you probably know, Peter, a couple of years ago, I had a really life-threatening accident where that resulted in me spending a lot of time in hospital, suffering from paralysis following a broken back. And I've been very lucky in life, to be honest. And that is probably going to be the defining point in my life, I would imagine. And I have to say, in the initial days, the sort of the darker days, I really struggled, and I kind of couldn't cope with what had happened, if truth be told. So I think it might sound like a total cliche here, and I hope it doesn't, but I think writing helped save my life. So I brought with me the journal that I kind of relied upon and invested in over the months I was in hospital. So each day I would write about, you know, what had happened that very day, or what I was thinking, or what I was worrying about, or even what I was thankful for and what I valued. And I think I've not been able to read it cover to cover, even 30 months on. I've read snippets here and there. I think there are perhaps some pages of inspiration within it, but I think equally that I know there are some really sort of frightful or negative chapters, I guess. And I've kind of used those to kind of spur on my you know, the journey I've been on to walk again and to you know, come back from everything that happened. So I've brought the journal along today because it means a lot to me.
No, that's clear. Yeah, I mean, I guess just the act of getting those negative thoughts out, even if you never read them ever again, it was probably a way to sort of deal with them. Like, I'll get them into the journal, and even if you never have to read them, but then also have those positive thoughts that you can read back on. I mean, after something like that, it would be a struggle to sort of get not just your body back in order, but your mind as well.
Yeah.
You know, I've never gone through anything like that, but I kind of understand that kind of negativity you'd have to deal with initially, getting it out in the journal, even if it stays closed. And then you can bring in that positivity later as as your mind and body were recovering. That does mean a lot. That would be something that would be quite inspirational to have with you. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think it was cathartic at the time, and you know, I think the full cycle of emotions, from fear to depression to anxiety, but equally to hope and thankfulness and relief as well, you know. So I think it's something that, while it is, you know, moleskin with paper inside of it, it's also full of I guess my identity, who I was, who I am, where I'm going. So when you asked me to bring something along, it was the only thing that I thought of, to be honest. Sense. So yeah, there you go.
No, it's a powerful thing to have. You know, it would have helped you in so many ways. And even, like I said, even if you never read those things back, just to have got that out, it's almost chronicling a journey that you may never read fully, but you can take things from and, you know, remember those moments and deal with those negative emotions and kind of know that is what helped you, was just getting it out there.
Yep.
Even if it's just in a closed journal, that was something that you needed that helped you sort of move on and get where you are now. That's great to have shared that with us. So the one thing I'm thinking is, you've obviously brought this journal along today. So is this something you keep on your person? Do you have it somewhere at home? Where have you been keeping this normally?
So I keep it in the bedside table. I'd be lying if I said I journal every day. I do write, I guess, to myself from time to time, perhaps when I need to. But I think going back to when I had the accident, and you know, my wife had my phone, had my belongings, and she'd put on Twitter that or X as we now call it. She'd put it out there that, you know, Jamie's in the ICU. We're waiting to see what happens. And as the weeks went on when I was in hospital, people in the Northeast tech sector started a GoFundMe page for me, and I had no idea about this at all. And my dad told me about it one day in hospital, and Sammy, my wife, was reading out all of the messages, and people were effectively donating money to help support my rehab. And I was really embarrassed about this. I felt very uncomfortable about it. Maybe, I don't know, the attention or whatever. And I guess I was in a very low place and, had lost any sort of sense of self-worth, if I'm honest. And then I think that inspired me to not only write and contain my own thoughts in this journal, but to start writing publicly about what I was doing. So you'll be familiar with the concept in the technology sector and in the startup world, which is build in public. So if you're running a startup, the concept is that you are sharing your learnings, sharing your vulnerabilities, sharing your journey and documenting it with the world, be that a piece of bespoke code that you're writing, a challenge that you've overcome, how you're feeling with the pressures of entrepreneurship, whatever it might be. So that I've always loved that about the tech sector. I've always loved. Now I know tech can have connotations of tech bros and kind of West Coast USA and jumping over people to get ahead and all of that. But when I've looked at the UK tech scene and certainly the northern and northeast tech scene, I've always felt the nucleus has had sort of respect and help and collaboration as kind of its essence, and I've always loved that. So I kind of wanted to take that build in public, concept and use that in my recovery, because I felt very uncomfortable people even wishing me well, never mind giving me money, which was has literally paid for the physio over the years and whatnot, which is amazing. So I wanted to, instead of just journal and self-contain those thoughts, I wanted to put them online. So I started writing Medium accounts and kind of giving updates on how I was progressing or how I was feeling. All of my rehab, be it hydrotherapy in the pool or in the physio center or just trying to stand up out of the wheelchair, I would put that on the likes of Twitter and Instagram, and I would feel that I would get the buoyancy of people commenting and saying, Jamie, this is amazing, keep going. And that meant a hell of a lot to me. And equally, I guess the positivity, Peter, of social media is I was able to connect with people around the world, and people would email me or they would send me voice notes or WhatsApp messages telling me about their stories and their adversities and kind of asking me questions about rehab. And Jamie, I noticed you did this, or I noticed you did this movement, or you're clearly doing this with this apparatus. Why are you doing that? What muscle group is it engaging with? How is it helping you? Or how are you coping mentally? And I kind of, so to answer the question, while I absolutely cherish, I guess is the strange word to use that springs to mind, this journal, I also, I didn't just contain the thoughts to myself. I put them out there in the world. And I guess I very rarely feel proud of myself, to be honest. But looking back over the past couple of years, opening that discourse up, I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, so you've not shared the journal itself, but you've shared the kind of feelings you were having with everyone else, and you got that support. I mean, it is a very supportive community in the Northeast generally, regardless of what's happened. But, I remember seeing those posts. I remember seeing that first post on social media because I was following you even back then, and I was so shocked. I was like, what's happened, And everyone was kind of like that. And it was just good that you were open like that, because not only did it help people see how well you were doing and follow your recovery, but it was helping other people who were further down that road or had a similar situation to see this is the direction, and that gave them something as well, So so even though the journal itself, I'm guessing you've probably not shared and no one's read it, you did share a lot of things openly in a different way.
I think there are, there's certainly elements of the journal which I've kind of touched on publicly. Excuse me, but even I haven't. I think, if I'm honest, some of the pages I've maybe started to read and then couldn't quite read because it was difficult. But I think maybe one thing I've learned is everyone, to some extent, has some sort of trauma,
Yeah.
be it recent or be it maybe secondhand or long term or whatever it might be. And I think, despite it being an incredibly difficult thing to deal with, it's also something that maybe unifies us as well. So you know, my trauma will be completely different to yours, to the next person. But I think if people can talk and have some vulnerability and support one another, then hopefully it's kind of, perhaps to use another cliche, but you know, making good of something bad.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's turning something that's happened in your life. It might be any kind of thing that's impacted someone, and being able to turn that into a positive, you know, overcome that initial negativity. That's really going to help someone as well to know, you know, no matter how bad things are getting, you can always be more optimistic. And it shows how supportive people around you can be. Even people you don't know will group together and support someone, you know, who's going through a trauma or whatever. So one of the other things is there a picture that's inspired you of somewhere or something? So yes, why don't you share that with us?
So as I say, I spent a long time in hospital and in various hospitals, and my wife framed 2 pictures. We'd got married a few months beforehand, so there was a nice photo of the 2 of us from our wedding day. But she's very smart, my wife, which I'm very lucky to be privy to that smartness. And she gave me this picture. So this is a picture of the 2 of us at the top of Kilimanjaro. So a few years ago, while people might know that I'm a massive tech geek and kind of regional advocate, a big part of my identity has always been in sort of the outdoors and kind of exploration, adventure, fitness. I've always been into sports since I was a kid, but my 2 main things were being part of a running club, shout out Gosforth Harriers, and being a hiker as well. So we've hiked, you know, we've done all of the big UK summits over and over again. We've done hikes in Europe, Asia, and then a massive, probably the greatest thing I've done in my life was we did a week-long trek to the summit of Kilimanjaro. Yeah. And on the summit night, it was a sort of a 10 to 12-hour hike, and you had to do it through the night because it obviously gets so hot during the day, so much so that the terrain crumbles, so it's not safe for kind of step after step. So you do it through the night when the sun goes down, so that the earth freezes and it therefore compacts, so you can walk on the ground. So at about 7 a.m. when the sun was rising, we got to the top. We got to the top of the mountain, and I actually I proposed to her on the top.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And with oxygen levels depleting and nowhere to run, luckily she said yes, just to get off the top of it. But and I think the reason she printed the picture out and put it by my bedside was when I had the accident and I lost all sort of sensation and mobility below the hips, and because of the extent of the damage to my spinal cord, the big fear was, and the uncertainty was, the likelihood of not walking again.
Yeah, of course.
And I mean, very luckily, after a couple of months, a big toe flickered. After 6 months, I stood up. After a year, I took some steps with a Zimmer frame. So, excuse me. So I think she very wisely she knows that she knows that I work hard, and she knows that I needed some inspiration, some visualization, or some reminders, I guess, at least, of kind of where we've come from and you know where the goal would be to get to again. And look, I mean, walking from one side of Northumberland Street to the other is a challenge. So getting back up the highest mountain in Africa might be a bit too ambitious. But it was such a moment of happiness and such a, I guess, something I'm really, really passionate about, and something I think that she knew would, you know, make me focus and not give up. So yeah, it's probably the most special photo I have, I think, Peter.
Yeah. No, that's really good because, I mean, achieving that, getting to the top of Kilimanjaro, that's no small achievement. I certainly couldn't do anything like that. But it's just like interesting that now drives you. You know that every kind of achievement you have, probably as you've been recovering, just getting to the end of Northumberland Street or something like that, that is almost feeling probably like the hike up to Kilimanjaro. You had this mountain to climb, and now because of what's happened, those mountains to climb have become a bit more daily than that. But you never know, that goal is there, and you might be at the top of Kilimanjaro again, maybe celebrating an anniversary. Who knows?
Who knows?
But it's amazing to have something like that you can look at, and it's such an amazing moment anyway, a proposal. But the fact that can sort of drive you forward, if you're having a struggle or not having a good day, you can know, right, let's overcome that. Let's climb that mountain today. What's today's mountain? Is it going somewhere? Is it just going out? Is it just doing something you would have probably took for granted before? That's really good.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, getting to the top of the mountain wasn't something where, we just decided it one day and then the next day we went and did it. I think it was born out of kind of the way we've lived our lives and kind of the things we've enjoyed and been passionate about and the things that we've built up to. And I think, again, I'm always conscious of sounding. I read so many books. Be it I've spent so much time in my 20s reading books about business and entrepreneurship and mindset, and it all kind of just, I guess, can bumble into cliche after cliche. So I'm always conscious of not sounding like a douchebag. But I think it serves genuinely. I believe as a reminder of kind of you take the little steps and you invest in the small things, the micro goals, it's the small steps that lead to the big steps. And I think that's how I've focused my recovery, just kind of incremental improvements, getting better, a fraction of a % each day, each week, and eventually, it does accumulate, and then you can climb your own mountain. God, I do sound like a cliche. Sorry, I do apologize. But genuinely, I think, we all have our challenges. Again, mine will be different to yours. I mean, I know you're a brilliant, software developer, and I bet that, how old you are now, you're better than what you were 20 years ago. And that's come from dedication to your craft and kind of learning things and being open-minded and trying. And you'll have days where, me as a writer, there's things that I look back on and I'm like, oh my goodness, that was terrible what I wrote. Or, there's equally, there are genuinely times where I look at something and I think, I'm really pleased I wrote that. That wasn't too bad, was it? So I think it's kind of just, as I say, having that photo by my bedside table, especially in the dark days, it served a purpose, put it that way.
I mean, those little wins, I know what you're saying. Like when I was sort of learning to be a software developer, those little wins, just getting something to work, just getting something to happen.
Yeah, it's buoyant, isn't it?
It gives you that sort of push to do the next thing and the next thing. And you've climbed a literal mountain, but you've also got those business, those metaphors as well for kind of going step by step, because those little wins will take you much further. Because often when you hear successful entrepreneurs talk, you realize they've gone through those little phases. You think, they just got successful overnight. And then they tell you all the things, all the decisions, maybe things they took the wrong path. And it's interesting to hear that their stories aren't too far removed from everyone else's. They just made those decisions. They were willing to take that next step, even if it was a small one, because they knew eventually that would get to their goal. And you took those steps to climb that mountain, and you're probably going to take more steps than that. So it's just seeing that sort of onward trajectory and, always looking forward, always looking for the positive. Even if things have turned unstarted negative, you can always turn that around, and you just have to take that first small step and see where it takes you. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Jamie, for sharing that. So, has there ever been like a drinks or a dinner or something where you've been out and some inspiration has happened? Maybe someone's inspired you there. Has anything like that happened to you?
Yeah, so I think this is where I've been, really lucky in life, where I love being a journalist. I love meeting people. I love meeting interesting people and being inspired by them. And it's almost like having, like a front row ticket to different concerts or different bands that you like, and being able to be kind of privy to the music. So don't get me wrong, I've interviewed a lot of dull people, boring people, disingenuous people. And, there's times where I've written articles that have probably reflected that. But I've always felt with the tech sector and meeting entrepreneurs and meeting people with genuine fire in their belly to add value and do something creative, do something innovative, that's really inspired me. Genuinely, it really, really has. And I think that's why I left sort of B2B journalism, sort of sector agnostic, to really doubling down on the tech sector as a vertical. So there are many entrepreneurs in the Northeast where we've done traditional. I've gone in their office and interviewed them, or I've done open dinners and we've talked and I've written it up, or we've done roundtables, or I've had people on stage. We had Atif, the Wutzano founder, at the TechNext Festival in the summer. His journey was really special. His commitment to the region and his kind of vision for growing a global company from North Tyneside, that genuinely inspired me.
Yeah.
But I think, I understand the nature of the question. Like a drinks thing, you might expect it to be, a glass of beer or wine in a pub setting or restaurant setting sort of thing. But actually, if I'm really honest, again, to go back to hospital, I was in the third hospital, and the setting that I was in, I'd had a little bit of movement in a toe, but the kind of the weeks had come and went, and kind of progress had plateaued.
Yeah.
And the realities of being disabled and the fear of not being able to walk again, and therefore having a feeling like I would have a door closed to some of the things that I was incredibly passionate about, again, to go back to my identity, was really starting to break me. And I had one night in hospital. So basically in the hospital that I was in the centre of it, there was a Costa Coffee. And I used to take any opportunity I could to get off the ward. And, I didn't have the strength to sort of push myself in the wheelchair. So a visitor would basically take me. So one night my wife took me, and for the first time in my life, I completely broke down, and I just totally lost it. And for the first time in my life, had I guess what would be either a panic or an anxiety attack. And I guess that spilled into the next day, and this was probably, lowest of the low. And that next night, I had one visitor, and that sole visitor was my dad. And my dad and I are very close. He's a great dad, but he's a best mate as well. And when we were growing up, we would play Nintendo 64 together. He would do all the levels on Zelda that I couldn't do. He introduced me to Doom. And my dad has run like a digital agency for a long time. So we always had, like the old cubic white Apple computers. And he got me into tech basically. And I think any, young boy who their dad's their hero, you kind of want to emulate them. So I'm sure there is, subliminal decisions, subconscious things I've done, which have probably led me to maybe the field I'm in, and that's largely probably due to my dad. And we had a conversation, and he knew I was suffering, and he sat there and he inspired me. He basically said, "Look, you might never ever walk again, and we're gonna have, that's a reality, and it's something we need to accept." But he's going, "I don't think it's impossible, and I think if anyone can do it, it's you." And he made me feel like, I was back on top of the mountain. He made me feel great from feeling so low. And he basically said to me, "Look, you've got to do everything you can over the next couple of years to come back from this, and you need to believe that you're going to do it." Because I wasn't seeing progress. I was feeling sick. I was in pain. The uncertainty was crippling. I didn't want to look at myself in the mirror. I didn't feel like me anymore. I felt like a failure, to be honest with you. When I look back at the journey in hospital and how challenging it was, I think genuinely that night, after how low I was, to then, I guess, vacillate to feeling quite indignant and defiant and feeling like, right, let's fight this, let's do it. And, you know, I think maybe one thing I take pride in is, you know, telling other people that they can't do things and that I'll help them and I have the back. And it's probably the only time in my life, or part of an only time in my life where I needed someone else to reach down and pull me up. So that, in terms of being inspired myself, that is truly a memory that I think I'll always cherish. It was that powerful, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, it does, definitely. I mean, it's great to sort of, you just needed even the smallest amount of inspiration. That's what you needed. You know, he was helping you play those levels in Zelda, and there he was, just to kind of give you that nudge and say, you can do this.
Yeah.
You know, let's start now. Every little step is a step in the right direction. And that's what you needed. You just needed someone to say, let's do this. And you were like, let's take it on. And I like that. You know, that's exactly what you needed. And that's a really great moment to have that kind of inspiration. It's exactly what you needed at the right time.
Thanks, Peter.
So we've talked about how you've been inspired and how people have inspired you. Is there a moment where you've inspired someone else?
I think this is a good question, and I really struggle with kind of I guess talking positively about myself. Like, don't get me wrong, I can stand on stage in front of a room of people and interview a dauntingly impressive entrepreneur or something like that. But yeah, this I find hard. Maybe a couple of examples. So I'm a Newcastle Uni graduate, so I actually studied history at uni. I get the irony of now working in shiny futurist technology. And obviously I've studied journalism as well, and now I'm in tech. So when I work with Newcastle Uni and as part of the alumni, speak to different faculties. So again, history undergrads, journalism students, but the careers service actually really, really helped me at university. So, you know, I came out, good degree from a good university, couldn't get a job. Very, very naively, just kind of didn't know exactly what I wanted to do or maybe even what I could do. And that service really helped me as well. So I genuinely believe in the idea of like paying it forward and paying it back, and kind of, I think I certainly don't mean from the money that people donated me on that GoFundMe page, which is part of it, but I've genuinely benefited from the knowledge, experience, and help of so many people in the Northeast. Be that people who have been ecosystem builders in the tech sector, people who have been entrepreneurs and creatives, people who have been, you know, C-suite level or whatever it might be. So I really, I do believe in kind of like, you know, putting my money where my mouth is and walking the walk. So I'd go back and do that. And I've had various comments, which have then turned into relationships and contacts over the year, where I've, I guess, become a mentor for others. So I think that's something that I cherish. I guess away from the lens of the sort of the region and the sector, when I started posting these public rehab videos on social media, and when I started writing about dealing with trauma and mental health, I think one thing that shocked me was the amount of messages that I would get. So I would get general messages on, say, like a post of maybe me trying to swim, for instance.
Yeah.
And I would have people saying, you know, I can see you working hard. This is inspiring. Keep it up. And I would love that stuff, and that would fuel me to, you know, keep going.
Yeah.
But I had one guy in, funnily enough, actually in Silicon Valley. So from the tech world, but then I guess permeating my personal life. And he'd, in true Silicon Valley nature, he'd fallen out of an avocado tree, which sounds, you wouldn't get that in Gateshead, would you?
No, you wouldn't.
But in all seriousness, he'd fallen out, and he'd broken his back, and the extent of the damage wasn't as severe as mine, but it was he was impaired, put it that way, and he'd basically emailed and said, look, I've been following you on social media and I've seen these videos, but actually I've started reading your words as well. I didn't realize you were a writer. And he said, honestly, this the commitment that you have really, really inspires me. And I started realizing there's a guy called Chris Owens, who I'm sure you know, who Northeast photographer, who runs the Pattern Networking event.
Yes,
and
yes.
Chris is typically, like a lot of people in the sort of the Newcastle kind of business community, he's just a really good guy, really authentic. And I put a post out on Instagram where I'd finally got to the point where I started having a bit of self-worth again. And I wrote this post and shared these pictures and these wins of my rehab. And I said, look, I don't know who this post is for, and I by no means have any intention to come across as preachy or an influencer here or anything like that. But here are some things I've learned, and here are some reflections that I have. And I said, look, as I say, I don't know who it's for, but, you know, believe me, if you're in the worst place that you could possibly be in, there is always hope.
Yeah.
And Chris wrote back something really succinct and really profound. And this is me building Chris up here. Usually I'm taking the mick out of him. And he said, Jamie, this is for everyone. And I kind of, I was like, do you know what? You're right. Like, it doesn't matter what you're dealing with or, you know, what the challenges are. Like, everyone has them. Some are seen, some are public. Quite often they're unseen, and actually just by, I guess, showing some vulnerability and connecting and wanting to help and wanting to, and just being a human, man. Like, it's worth something. It's important. So, I suppose a bit of inspiration back at me, which I very much appreciated.
So we've obviously talked about a few ways that, you know, people have inspired, you know, obviously your journey and the things that have happened, but also, like, how do you find inspiration generally? Like, say now, what's your source of inspiration these days?
Yeah, so I think, you know, I guess I've talked a lot about myself and the journey I guess I've been on, and then equally talked about tech sector a bit as well. And I think through the lens of the tech sector, there's probably two things. So I will say this. I am never, very, very rarely, probably never the smartest person in the room, but I am usually, or what I try to be, is the most well-prepared person in the room. So if I'm going to go and interview someone, or I'm doing a tech event or whatever it might be, you know, I always think the more I do my homework, the more I'm prepared, the better this will be. Or certainly it'll, you know, the audience will get, you know, what they deserve. So I'm finding inspiration. I read a lot. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, but I've read stuff on, you know, Anne Handley's Everybody Writes. I read a lot from Guardian writers, for instance. But then in terms of tech sector and building startup communities, a lot of Brad Feld's work from what he's done in Boulder, Colorado. And equally, all of the kind of the stuff that you would see like in the sort of self-help or entrepreneurship or psychology kind of section of like a W.H. Smith's. Like, they've all got the same bland white covers, but the chances are, you know, I've Atomic Habits, you know, James Clear, things like this. I've read all of it, Simon Sinek stuff, and it's all great. And I think it's all, I've taken learnings from all of it, and I've challenged parts of it as well. And I think it's important that with anything, you look at the historiography and you look at kind of what books are telling you, and rather than just take them take them as gospel, you take them with a pinch of salt. You pick out the bits that you like and you disregard the bits that you don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So there's that. And then equally, I think I had a bit of an epiphany a few years ago where I kind of thought, I need to stop doing this. I need to go back to just reading fiction and reading novels and reading how other people write. You know, like, you've got great writers like Irvin Welsh who write in their own unique ways, right?
Yeah.
You know, it really pees me off when people say, you must write like this, or you mustn't write like this. And so I think I've absolutely been a sponge for all of the kind of the non-fiction teachings and learnings style books. But I think I had an over-reliance on it. I think I started, you lose that essence of fun and creativity, and that's the stuff that is the bedrock of innovation, right? Curiosity. And where better to get curiosity from than, go and read Tolkien. Like, if you want to succeed in business, you don't have to read all of those bland white cover books, right? I'm sure there's great learnings in them, and I've seen great learnings in them. But equally, I do take inspiration from fiction and creative writing as well. I think the thing that really helped me personally was two books. So one, Meditations, so ancient Roman book about sort of Stoicism and kind of the controlling what you can control. And, when I was in hospital, I was faced with all this kind of uncertainty and anxiety, and kind of used that book to help me take back control to as best as I could. And then very, very, very randomly, but something which I kind of came to rely on is my wife keeps calling me a boomer because I never use TikTok, but I will watch YouTube shorts. I will fall into a YouTube cavern or a YouTube loophole of just kind of like watching these 30-second random clips, okay? And my algorithm must be filled with sports, travel, entrepreneurship, tech. It's probably the weirdest accumulation that you could possibly find. But there's a guy who has unfortunately passed away now, but big in the sporting world, was Kobe Bryant, who was an elite USA basketballer. And I think on the surface level, he was known for being athletic and being tough and trash talking and whatnot. But he, unlike a Michael Jordan who had the physique and, could wrap his hand around a ball, and he had the body to be the best.
Yeah.
A bit like in, football, where you've got the people who are the ripped kind of six pack and the muscles, and they have body fat percentages of 2%, and they would never drink a lager in a million years. But then I think the athletes I respect are the ones who, maybe don't have the body for it, but they squeeze every last drop out of the body that they have, out of the mind that they have, or the background that they have. And Kobe was someone who he was unrelenting in kind of the little things, the increments, the getting better each day, the dedication, the mindset. And I started being really, really inspired by his videos and his words. And, I'm not a natural basketball fan. I've probably got into basketball on the back of his, I guess, words about life. And it's kind of, there is this, I'm a sucker for like cliched like American movies and the Rocky movies, for instance, stuff like that. Bit daft, but ultimately it kind of gets you pumped up a little bit. Yeah. And there's a Kobe video which I watch it or listen to it before my first gym session of the week, before my first rehab session, and it's about 10.5 minutes long, and it's kind of, he's just in your ear, sort of saying, you can do this, you can do that, you must believe this, must believe that. And I get it, that stuff can be a little bit maybe toxic or intimidating for some people. And so this is not me sort of cookie cuttering saying this will help everyone. Yeah. But it was just something that I stumbled upon on a YouTube short one day where I was really low and needed that hand up, and kind of, I suppose those words and that journey and the respect that I sort of started to have for the guy then kind of lifted me up. And so a very random one there, Peter. But I think to bring this full circle, I think in terms of finding inspiration, it's reading things, accepting you don't know everything. So go and, if knowledge is free, go and get it.
Exactly,
Talking to people, there's a great Anthony Bourdain quote where he talks about, go and have a beer with someone who has different views to what you have. We're all human beings, go and speak to someone, learn from someone. So I think absolutely doing that as well. And I think ultimately you can inspire yourself as well, you know. And this is something that I'm maybe trying to learn right now. Definitely think I'm still recovering and still trying. But I think the more I can kind of talk to other people and connect with other people, hopefully the more that can kind of come back to me and validate me and who I am as well. So yeah, I think there's different ways you can find inspiration.
Exactly. It's like you can sort of take the things that mean the most to you. It might be, it was being inspiration by Kobe Bryant, for example, for yourself, but it could be something completely random for someone else. You might find it on a YouTube short or whatever. You take the things that matter to you. You find that thing that you're looking for that gives you just that extra push, that extra bit of motivation to take that first step or to take that next step and keep going. Because sometimes you do just need something to kind of, you might be feeling a bit low that day, or you just kind of need a bit of motivation and listen to a bit of powerful music, or you listen to something, a podcast that you like or whatever. Just overcomes that little hurdle that you had. And then once you go in, you can keep going to the next step and, hopefully go on from there.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
That's great, Jamie. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we finish?
Well, just thank you for having me on. And, obviously was really happy to be asked, and obviously have a lot of respect for you and what you do in the sector and in the Northeast. And quite conscious that I've spoken a lot maybe about myself today. But just, I guess, to maybe bring it back to where we started, I think like you, I'm really proud to be from the Northeast and to work in the Northeast tech sector and hopefully add a little bit of value there. And I think today we've talked a lot about people and communities and connecting and giving back, and I think that's probably maybe the superpower that we have here in the region. So certainly if anyone is looking to start a company here in the region, or is looking to maybe get into the tech sector, or has an opinion as to or an idea as to how we can improve some facets of what's going on, I'm always open to that and willing to have the conversation. So yeah, please get in touch if people would like to.
Yeah, because it's like you can highlight what's going on. It's like things don't happen in isolation here. Thanks to things like the Newcastle Tech Digest and the way you can share what's going on here. We've got Tech Next, which is a major tech festival where lots of things are going on in the Northeast, and also bringing people here as well to talk about subjects that people might be surprised. We've obviously got AI, we've got robotics and all these kind of things. We know there's a lot of innovation happening here, and there's a lot of innovation that could also happen here as well. And it's just like, it's been great to sort of grow up in this region and see it change over time, and to see this thirst and desire, and the skills are here. We can retain people in the Northeast. We can build up tech companies, not just your companies like Sage and those that people have heard of, but also that next company, that next big company you might hear of might be from here. And that's what I like. We've got that sort of, we're building a foundation.
Isn't it? It's exciting.
I like that.
Yeah.
We've got a lot going on here, and it's kind of our job to kind of highlight that, I think, and I like that.
Yeah, me too.
That's brilliant. So that's great, Jamie. It's been really great to have you on today. So that's been another episode of Talking Inspiration, and you can listen to us wherever you listen to your podcasts, or you can check us out on social media as well. So that's been Talking Inspiration.
Niltoni Broadcast Network, NBN, popcorn for your ears.